Okay, as promised in the previous tutorial, here we're going to look at the audio mixer. Although, that said, I'm not just going to look at one audio mixer, I'm going to look at two distinct audio mixers. And you might be wondering, why on earth would we want two distinct audio mixers? Well, as you'll see as we progress through this tutorial, having two distinct mixers, one designated for clips and one designated for tracks, can be extremely useful. You won't need to write in as many keyframes. You'll see what I mean in a moment. First of all, let me come down to the timeline. Now, what you can see, well, as soon as I enlarge this piano track, now what you can see is I've got two versions of the same clip. I've got this version, followed by exactly the same thing, albeit it's a little bit longer in length. And I've placed this clip twice like this, solely so I can show you the distinction between the clip mixer and the track mixer. Also notice whilst we're here that because I am using the same clip, you'll see a horizontal blue line running across the bottom of each, simply there to indicate we are using a duplicate. Okay, now I'm going to go back up to the top left of the program, and the way I've got mine set up is you can see here my third tab along is my audio clip mixer. I'll just explain what we see once I select it so that we can get the principles of what the mixer is like before looking at the slightly more complex track mixer. Okay then, so we are looking at the clip mixer, and because we've got three audio tracks on our timeline, not including the master output, but the three audio clips that we've got, well, they're reflected here with each of these individual strips. Audio 1, Audio 2, and the one that we renamed earlier on, Piano. Okay, here they are, down on the timeline, tracks 1, 2 and 3, audio tracks 1, 2 and 3, and just below the master track. By the way, speaking of renaming our audio tracks, remember how I did it earlier on in a previous tutorial? I right-clicked on the header of the track and named it Piano. Well, if you want to do the same thing here within the mixer, well, perhaps it's a little bit easier, to be honest. All you would need to do is highlight what we've got already with this one, audio track 2 for example. Well, this is my audio track that I'm using to replace the original audio track that's embedded with the original video. So I'll call this one Replace. And of course, as soon as you change it here, it gets updated and reflects down on our timeline with these tracks. I'll show you what I mean. I just need to enlarge our track area. And there you can see, audio track 2 is now called Replace. By contrast, because we've not changed audio track 1, that is, of course, now still called audio 1. But if I come over and change it, I'll call this one Embedded, or maybe I should have really called it Original, whatever. As soon as we do change it here, it automatically gets updated on our timeline. Okay, now speaking of updating, we know already, as we have done for the past few tutorials, I've got audio track 1, now called Embedded, and audio track 2, now called Replace. Well, I've got these two tracks muted. You can see the mute buttons here. When these M buttons are illuminated in green, of course that means these two clips won't be heard. However, if you want to change it from mute and isolate the clip so only this one is heard, click on the button next to it, the S button, the solo button, and then just to the right of that, if you want to write in any keyframes, well, of course you can do. Wherever your CTI is, if you clicked on here, then a keyframe would be included at that point with whatever settings you've got here. You could then move along the timeline, change some settings, whether it's the fader volume, the panning, simply by clicking on here to create another keyframe would include it there. So upon playback, you would see those changes reflected. Now speaking of panning, as you can see just above, we've got this radial dial that allows you to change the panning for this particular clip left to right. And reflective of a real mixer, an old analog mixer, although I should include digital mixers these days, you can see a fader here that you can drag down to attenuate the audio for this clip, or you could increase it if you want to. Whatever you set the fader at, you'll see reflected just below the fader here. And at the moment I've attenuated this embedded audio track down by nearly 14 dB. Okay, now I'm going to take this back up to 0 dB. A quick way of doing this is by holding your Alt key down and then clicking on the fader there, and that immediately snaps it back to optimum level, 0 dB. Okay, so as I say, all you would need to do is drag your fader to wherever you want this clip to be registering in terms of volume, and then adjust the pan position, either using the radial dial, or there's that number underneath. You could type it in if you want to. And that would affect only this strip. You can see that we've got another 2 strips for the other 2 clips. And that's what you would do. You would work your way through, changing the volumes or the pan position, so that you get a nice balance of the audio at that particular point for your individual clips. Okay, now I'm going to take my audio for all 3 clips back to Unity. I'll hold Alt down and click on each individual fader there. So that's it really, that's the audio clip mixer. If you can't see it by the way, just come up to Window and drop down to the option there, Audio Clip Mixer. You can see the shortcut too. Now a couple of categories below there, you'll see Audio Track Mixer. So there is a slight difference. And you'll also notice with the flyout to the right, this audio track mixer will apply to this particular sequence, this Anglesey sequence. If we'd got multiple sequences set up, then we would be able to choose. In our case we haven't, we've only got this one running. And the way I've got Premiere Pro set up means that my audio track mixer is just to the right of the clip mixer. There it is. So as I said earlier on, it's slightly more complicated to look at, and in fact we've even got some functions hidden away. Now I'm actually going to leave it here for this tutorial now that we've looked at the track mixer, and in the following tutorial we'll further investigate the track mixer and I'll talk about the differences between using both.